wilds beyond they speak your name with reverence and regret, for none could tame our savage souls, yet you the challenge met. Under palest watch you taught, we changed, base instincts were redeemed, a world you gave to bug and beast as they had never dreamed. If you ask me what my favorite video game is, I would probably say it's a tie between Hollow Knight and Jeopardy for the Xbox 360. But right now I'm going to talk about Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is an incredible game. It's a Metroidvania set in the kingdom of Hallownest, in a world where there are no humans, only bugs. You play as the knight, who has returned to Hallownest after many years out in the wasteland beyond. The knight is a small beetle-like bug with a dark past, which I won't talk about here as to not spoil it. The storytelling in Hollow Knight is nothing short of incredible, so I would suggest playing it yourself if you want to learn the lore. Like I said before, Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania. The gameplay is simple and effective, and it gets more complicated as you get more proficient in it. By the end of the game, bosses you found tough before will be much easier, but Hollow Knight is by no means an easy game. Hollow Knight is difficult, especially on a first playthrough. Hallownest is a dangerous world full of beasts of many shapes and sizes, and you're never completely safe. If you don't master the nail you are given, then even early enemies will kill you quickly. You need to stay focused at all times, especially during bosses. You will gain abilities throughout the game, but if you aren't able to use your nail proficiently, then you will never beat Hollow Knight. Speaking of abilities, I mentioned earlier that the gameplay gets more complicated as you go. This is because of the many abilities you gain throughout Hollow Knight, but it never feels overbearing or too complicated, because the game introduces them slowly and gives time to learn them. Let's look at an example. In Hollow Knight, you start with two main mechanics, your nail and soul. Your nail is a weapon, like a sword of some kind. This is easy to understand, while soul is slightly more complicated. When you hit an enemy with your nail, you gain a small amount of soul. When you have enough soul, you can focus the soul to gain lost health. New players might find it difficult to remember both of these mechanics, so the first 30 minutes to an hour of the game, these are the only two abilities. But after a while of exploring the first area, the Forgotten Crossroads, you will find the first boss in the game. It is called the False Knight, and it is a rather easy boss if you know what you're doing. Just remember to attack quickly and run away when the boss swings his hammer. After defeating him, a new room is unlocked, where you meet a new bug. After showing you have mastered the nail and the soul mechanics by beating the False Knight, you are given your first new ability, the Vengeful Spirit. This is a blast you can shoot out to attack enemies, and it uses soul just like the healing ability. This makes gathering soul much more important. When you get the new ability, you go through a small area where you need to use the Vengeful Spirit to defeat a boss. After this, you can use it to unlock the second area of the game, Green Path. This progression all happens in the first area, and there are tons of areas in the game. Still want a challenge after you've gotten the true ending of the game? Well, don't worry, because there are many challenges. All the footage of this video is from my first attempt at a mode called Steel Soul, which you unlock after beating the game. In Steel Soul, if you die, you have to restart from the beginning. Another optional challenge is called God Home, where you can refight every single boss in the game, one after the other. There's also new bosses that they introduced just for the boss rush. Like I said before, Hollow Knight's story and methods of storytelling are great. I won't go much into it here, so I won't spoil it for anyone, but the game has many smaller stories based around the individual characters, and I'll talk about one smaller story in this section. When exploring an area called the Fungal Wastes, you can find a large empty room. When you walk into the room, a character will jump out of the ground and introduce herself as Cloth. Cloth explains that she's on a quest in Hallownest to prove her bravery, and she hopes to meet you again. Later in an area called Deep Nest, you can find her tired and beaten up after fighting a horde of beasts. She talks about how she doesn't like Deep Nest as it is full of spiders, and she wants to find a less terrifying challenge elsewhere. Then you can find her hiding in the ground after defeating some enemies in the ancient basin area. She tells you she decided to hide from the monsters because she was overwhelmed, but you have inspired her to try again. Finally, you meet her in an area called Queen's Garden. There is a powerful boss there called the Traitor Lord, and Cloth will help you defeat him. Sadly, at the end of the fight, she is killed by the Traitor Lord, but you can find her ghost where she speaks about how great the fight was. But if you don't meet her in Queen's Garden, you can find her near the beginning of the game, sleeping. She wakes up and tells you that she will pursue more adventures outside of Hallownest. So, this is a story of Cloth, who traveled to Hallownest to prove her bravery and gets in too deep too fast. But that isn't the end. Using a special item called the Dream Nail, you can tell what she is thinking, and she is often thinking about someone named Nola. From her thoughts, you can piece together that she knew someone named Nola, and Nola had died. We learn she came to Hallownest to make Nola proud, and when she dies, she says that Nola is waiting for her on the other side. This attention to detail on a random character's backstory shows how dedicated Team Cherry was to making a fleshed out story and world for this game. Hollow Knight is a beautiful game. Despite being made by a small team, it has some of the best visuals and music I've seen in any game ever. This section will probably be the shortest, but I just want to dedicate a part of the video to the spectacle the game presents. The map of Hollow Knight is large and diverse, full of many unique locations, while keeping each one distinct from the last. It's amazing how unique Team Cherry made every place in the game with how many there are. One of my personal favorite locations is the City of Tears. This is a city that has been long abandoned, now drowning in dripping water from the lake far above it. The area looks different from anywhere else in the game, almost every wall and floor being made from slick, shining metal. The art of the game really helps make it feel like a real place. Everything feels like it belongs in the world, and it makes the world feel like it belongs to itself. It makes me wish I lived in this world despite all the dangers, just so I could see it all in person. Hollow Knight is the best game ever made in my opinion. The game is so unique in its presentation and storytelling, it has trumped settings like Middle-earth and became my favorite setting in fiction. I hope this video has inspired at least one person to try Hollow Knight, because I can't recommend it enough.